I haven't seen him as yet. But Julie, Gemma, Elliot, if you're in as well. I'm looking on the list and not picking you up at the moment. Oh, David's in, so welcome to you as well, David. So welcome to officers as well as the members. And we'll move on to item 1 on the agenda. I think, Liz, there's apologies, but I need to tell you, don't I, to say that you're going to start the meeting and ask you to start the recording.
Well, thank you. We received apologies from Councillor Kevin Griffiths, Erica Kirshner and Susan Jones. Okay, thanks, Liz. Anybody else that anybody knows about who hasn't been listed there? If not, I'll move on to item 2, which is disclosures of personal interest. So, anybody got any interests, personal or prejudicial, to declare? No. Can't see any signs of that, so we'll move on to item 3, just to say the prohibition of whip votes. Item 4 with the minutes of the previous meeting. You've all had a chance to look at them. I didn't have any concerns with them in that sense as far as I was concerned. If anybody has, can you say no? If not, can we accept them as a true record, please?
Accept.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Item 5 is public question time, and I don't think we've had any, Liz, have we?
No, we haven't.
Okay. And now I've got to change the agenda around, I think, as otherwise I'll have Julie shouting at me. So you want to do the item on the corporate parenting board first before the improvement program, don't you? So if we may, and is Gemma going to deliver this, or are you going to be involved with it as well, Julie?
So I'll just introduce, if you don't mind, Chair, so Gemma Wiley, who's our Principal Officer for Transformation, and then Tom Jones, who is our participation and children's rights worker in Child and Family Services. So I'm going to hand over to those two. And Tom's looking at me because they've got his job title wrong again. Sorry, Tom. You can put it right when you speak. Really sorry. But they've been leading on a pretty significant piece of work and helping us to work with the Corporate Parenting Board around understanding what matters to children and young people and the priorities for the Corporate Parenting Board to work on over the next year. Just to let you know, Paxton, I've just had a quick note from Dave, who sadly sends his apologies last minute. Something's just cropped up. So I'll just pass that on for the record. Okay. Sorry about that. So I'll just hand over to Gemma and Tom, who'll take us through Corporate Parenting Board update for Scrutiny. Thanks both.
Okay. Can I ask if you have a presentation, and if so, could you please display it?
Yep, I do. So I shall share my screen. Thank you, Julie. And good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're all well.
Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon, Gemma.
Just fiddling around. There might be some technical glitches as we go along, but I'll try and work through them as quickly as I can, because we've got a bit of a video that we'd like to share to showcase some of this work as well. But what we wanted to do was just to talk to you a little bit really about some of the work we've been doing with the Corporate Parenting Board on our ambition really to try to work more collaboratively with our children and young people who receive our care, as well as our counsellors who sit on that board and the officers that sit on that board as well. So today we're going to briefly touch on the kind of role and the function of the Corporate Parenting Board and who attends those meetings and what those meetings entail. We're going to talk to you a little bit about how we've got to where we are now, which is in the middle of sort of co-producing some pledges to work on with our Corporate Parenting Board. We have a video presentation to show you because that depicts the work really nicely. And then there was a further response after that video from the Corporate Parenting Board directly, and then I'm going to cover some progress and next steps. Quite helpfully, Tom's going to jump in at the end or throughout the presentation if I'm missing anything or speaking out of turn, because in fairness, Tom's leading a lot of the work with the young people. I'll also take questions. I'm happy to take them as we go through or at the end, whichever's easiest.
Well, I think we'll ask questions as we go through. If people have got something they want clarified, if that's all right with you, Gemma, I think that's probably the best way.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, Carl.
So to start with, it's just probably important to kind of go right back to basics. And Corporate Parenting Board is something that is written in our statute, so it'd be something that members of this group are familiar with. But just as a reminder, when a child becomes looked after or experiences our care, the local authority has a duty to become the kind of corporate parent for that young person. So we have a legal and moral responsibility for the children who experience our care, and the corporate parenting board is set up to support the local authority in discharging that duty, if you like. So on our corporate parenting board is made up of counsellors, cabinet members for children's services is the chair of that group, but we have members from across the cabinet that sit on that group. We have internal and external partners, so social services, Julie Davis is the head of child and family services, sits on that group, as well as colleagues from across the organisation from places like education, culture and tourism, housing, for example. We also have third-party representatives, representatives from the Health Board and the Youth Justice Board there as well. And ultimately, the role of the Corporate Parenting Board is really to ensure that care experienced children, young people and care leavers have the outcomes that any parent would want to achieve for their child. And we have a duty to ensure that our services are working collectively to support that ambition. And there are certain things that we explore and scrutinise as part of those group meetings, such as how we're looking after our children and young people, how well they are achieving their educational outcomes, if their health needs are being met, and what other kind of wraparound support, such as housing, access to culture and tourism opportunities, etc., are being offered appropriately for that group of young people. So that gives you an idea of sort of the who's who of that group. We wanted to give you an update really on recent progress, because over the last, I would say probably sort of 9 to 12 months, we've moved the group on quite significantly, thinking about how we work more co-productively with our children and young people. So in December, we explored the theme around what matters to me and what a best life means for our children and young people. As part of that work, we explored and we identified a number of key priority areas, all of which are listed. I won't reel them off because there's a video that kind of explains some of those, but they're listed there on the presentation for you. And then what we've done since then is we've explored in a little bit more detail with our young people and members of our corporate parenting board about exactly what those areas mean. Exploring what, so for example, what a best life might look like with regards to healthy relationships, the key areas for our looked after population that are have an interest in that particular area, what that means for them, to explore how we might want to take those forwards and how we might want to set some agreed actions collaboratively on what the young people can expect from corporate parents and to take those themes forwards. We then consulted with a wider group on the outcomes of those conversations, and we created a video which we used to share the work so far. So I wanted to start really by sharing that video. So I'll stop sharing this screen and share my other screen. This is where the technical glitches might come in, because I think I have to change my speaker output. But I think I know how to do it, so I would be tested, won't I? And it's being recorded, so it'd be embarrassing if I get it wrong.
It's all right. We'll keep our fingers crossed for you, Gemma. It's all right.
I'm hoping I've done it correctly, and when I press play, you'll be able to hear it. Can you hear that? Can you hear it?
No,
No.
see it. Can see it, but not hear it.
Yeah.
Without asking the stupid question, have you turned the computer sound on top right?
Say that again, please, Tom. I missed it.
Normally, just checking it. No, that's what's happened. My microphone is never down. I must be incredibly annoying. When you go to share,
I can't hear you now, but I think I've managed to. I think I've got it right.
Hope so.
Yes.
That's fine.
Well done.
about themselves. I don't know that much about me. I don't value anything. I need someone to help me to understand all about me and my family and my life. Love, family, and friendship. We want you to listen to what matters to me and make this a priority. We want you to think about who needs to know what about me. Help us to be the best person we can and be resilient. I love my family because I love my foster parents. Don't have placements too far away from friends.
They are people I spend time with and talk to.
Need more of mum and dad. All my family help me and make me feel happy. Because I've never had this before.
Family can help you out through thick and thin.
My name is Gemma. I live in Bridgend with my husband and my two cats, Aries and Zeus. And a best life is important to me because it's what we all want to achieve for ourselves. And we have a big responsibility in Swansea Council to help the children we look after and those who have experienced our care to help them get their best life. I'm here to tell you what happiness looks like to me. Make better matches for my placement, who I live with and where I live, and concentrate on relationship building. If you aren't happy, you aren't living life correctly. No one can be truly happy and a productive member of society if they are at risk of or living in poverty. Because I love my family and friends and they make me happy.
It is not nice if anyone is sad.
Being part of a family who I love, and they love me, so I have lots of friends who make me happy. I want everybody to be happy. This matters.
I am happy now and I hate having to speak to social workers as I can't tell them the truth, or my mother.
Hi, my name is Broga and I'm 12 years old. I like MHA and I think that we should live our best lives because we only have one life and kids in care don't really have the best life to start off. So maybe if somebody helped us, we could have a best future. I'm here to tell you what healthy relationships look like to me. Help me to know what these are and to have the best relationships I can. Having healthy love and family makes you happy. Need to not be judgy. I don't want to make the same mistakes.
How can I have a good relationship if I've never seen one?
Support me to have better relationships. Having healthy love and family makes you happy.
Gemma, I think your mute has gone on.
and independence of having good education and qualifications.
If you have a good job, then you have good pay.
Things to work towards in your own job will provide a sense of purpose and self-esteem. None of the other things can be achieved without this. I'm here to tell you about what's important, about a safe place to live, a welcome pack if I move placements. I'm really sick about what a good match for me looks like. To have a safe place to live is important for me. It gives me security because it makes me feel happy, settled, and like I fit in.
I am Wendy, I'm 70 and live in Swansea with my husband, and I love reading. Best life is important to me by making sure every young person gets the best life they deserve.
Mental health. We want a regular check-in for our mental health, make sure we are okay. More important than jobs. Check in with me to see if I'm okay. Being around my family and friends makes me happy and helps my mental health. Without it, I won't be happy.
I'm just checking that you can hear me now. Fab. Not too many technical glitches then, which is good. I'll put being able to play music through my speakers on my CV at some point. But we wanted to show you the video. That's the video that we created in collaboration with our young people, and we took it to the corporate parenting board to put those key priorities to the corporate parenting board. And the last bit of the video showed you the type of conversation that we had. I'm hoping that you'll agree with me that hearing the voice of young people is often very powerful, and it's very easy for us, or for me, to present to you what our young people think, but it's nowhere near as powerful as when you hear it directly from the young people. It's also very easy for us to bring young people into our way of working. We pull them into our board meetings. We ask them to engage with us in our professional way. And this was an opportunity for us to meet in the middle and create something in a platform that was more favoured by young people, because we want to create a shared space for co-production without needing to pull them into our world all the time. So this was an opportunity to do that. I'll put my slides back up so I can talk to you about what happened after we presented that. So as I said, we took the video to the corporate parenting board, and we had a really good conversation about what the pledges meant. The young people actually facilitated the board that morning, so we played some games to start us off, and it was a really good and energized conversation at the board to discuss the ideas that the young people had come up with. As a result, and off the back of that, a number of corporate parents got together and created almost a response video that depicted really the specific outcomes that we would almost pledge to achieve as a response to the areas that the young people told us that were important. So I've put a snapshot of what those were here. You can see the officers and the councillors that were involved in that video. I've also included the link in the presentation. I won't show you that video because we'll run out of time, but it gives you an idea of how we're trying to communicate with young people in a different way, show that we've heard them and show them that we are committed to making a difference and to acting on the things that are important to them, but showing it in a different way than perhaps we would normally. So, for example, when thinking about, Julie's response was to thank the young people for being involved, showing her what a best life might look like for them. Kelly Ahern, who's one of our service managers in Barnardo's, she is committed to working on the No Barriers to Opportunities pledge and thinking about how we create the same space, same opportunities for our care experienced young people. Helen Morgan-Rees, our Director of Education, was involved in the video. She's committed to helping young people catch up with their schooling if and when they need to, knowing that there are periods of time in these young people's lives that are quite chaotic and they need that additional support. Councillor Alison Pugh was involved and she pledged to help young people to achieve their kind of dreams and aspirations. So she's part of the working group looking at that. To just build on two pledges, because we've managed to do some quite significant work in two of the areas. For love, family and friendships, we are committed as a board now, or corporate parenting board is committed for things like looking at how we recruit foster carers, so that the foster carers we recruit have the necessary skills to support the areas that the young people feel they need support with. And to do things like listen to what's important and how we can support them and their carers and their family networks so that they can stay in touch with their young people, or that the young people can stay in touch with those around them when they come into our care. So we know that those networks are very important. And then with the healthy relationships work, we are committed as a board now to supporting young people to understand and to think about what healthy relationships are. And how we support them to become more independent with using those relationships as they grow into adulthood. So it gives you a bit of a flavour of the response that the Corporate Parenting Board made off the back of the request from young people. So some of that is still in development, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to keep providing Scrutiny colleagues with an update on progress as we move forwards with that. We had met as a board earlier on this week, and we discussed, gave an update on where some of the pledge areas were, and kind of reignited where some of the ones that we wanted to focus on moving forwards. So that gives you a bit of an idea of the sort of work that we've done so far in co-producing these pledges. I can see a hand up, so I'll answer those questions, Chair.
So first of all then, Des?
Yeah, it's not a question as such, Gemma. Going back now when I first elected 7 years ago, we done a workshop to do with children and care and all that. And it was okay listening to the social workers and everything. But I totally agree with you. Listening to them children by ear now had the same effect as when we invited children into that workshop, and listening to them personally really made me, not only me, but me and others sit up and think, wow, they come across better than what social workers do and all that, telling us what they wanted, which I think is a good thing. So thank you for putting that video up so we can listen to what they've got to say.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Okay, so thank you. Des? Des, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, thanks. A good presentation. But I noticed under the report of the Corporate Parenting Board, you missed out the education element. Helen Morgan-Rees is content, and a thought came through my mind as you were going through your presentation that every councillor is, I believe I'm right in saying, every councillor is a governor of a school, and in many cases it's two schools, and on each agenda of a governing body meeting is looked after children, and it gives councillors the opportunity there to question the senior management of the schools and on exactly what education is being offered and the care in the education systems for looked after children. And quite honestly, I think councillors can take that their responsibility as guardianship to another step, another level at that point in governing body meetings.
Okay.
Yeah, so Helen Morgan-Rees has been involved. So you'll have seen on one of my previous slides that she was part of the response video. So she gave some pledges from the Education Directorate, which is slightly different to individual school settings, more of an overview really on how she can support those young people from that perspective. But you're right, and I would suggest that the councillors who sit on the corporate parenting board are very much part of the shaping of these pledges. So I would hope that they're taking those forwards in their interactions. Part of that will be with school, about how they support the children who are looked after that are in those school populations as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Gemma, for the presentation. It really was interesting, and as Cyril said, hearing the children speak for themselves, or the young people, I should say, speak for themselves is obviously far more powerful than you reporting what they say, and I can understand that. Certainly in the past, when we've had a report back from the Corporate Parenting Board, we have had information on the progress that has been made by young people, particularly in education and comparison of their performance against the non-looked after children cohorts, to see how they compare. And I know we've been very concerned about that in the past. Now, it's one of the things that we would be looking for when we get a report, and then Julie will know this full well, I guess, as well, that we would like to see some sort of measure of what is being achieved by the young people who are looked after and part of the looked after group itself, just as our role, and I'm sure that's your role within Child and Family Services to determine that as well. So I don't know if there's any comments around or how we're looking in that respect at the moment, and whether there are any comparisons of the nature I said available, which there have been in the past. Julie?
I'm not aware of the data as such, but I can certainly ask Helen Morgan-Rees when I next catch up with her about that. But it's just something that I always say about comparing the attainment of looked after children with the rest of the population. When children see that, they can find that quite disheartening, because we know that they generally don't achieve as well as those that aren't looked after. It's almost as though we're publishing their failings. It's much, much better to focus on their progression in school. So where they started in school, and then in terms of when they end up, rather than just their attainment. Because what we do know is that, particularly from the support through something like Pupil Development Grant, is possible for looked after children to progress really well, but they may not necessarily attain those qualifications that their peers attain in school, but they may later on. So I think it would be beneficial to look at those two components, not just what they attain at the point that they leave school in terms of qualifications.
As I recollected, and what really concerned us a couple of years ago, I think it was, Julie, what we were seeing in terms of the outcomes were that year 6, there was not an awful lot of difference between looked after children and the rest of the school, in that sense, the rest of the cohorts at that age. Once you got to year 11, then there was a stark difference, and that's really what we were concerned about, was the development perhaps that wasn't being seen in secondary school as opposed to primary school. Now, I don't know if there's been any improvements in those areas. I don't know if you remember that at all, Des, in the past. Those are figures that we saw.
Yes, you're right, Paxton. Brings to mind one of the pieces of work we're doing on the education board, which Councillor Mike Dirk chairs, and that's the thought of an alternative curriculum in schools, because you're right, and it's looked after children perhaps who would benefit more than anyone else by an alternative curriculum, because yes, they by and far they're not the high achievers at junior and level. It's later on in life, yes, they can be, but the greatest help, I think, can be given to them at the earlier age, and an alternative curriculum would suit them greatly, I think.
Yeah, all I'm saying, I think that was a major concern that we had a couple of years ago, and hopefully it has been addressed one way or another. But I would like to see, in that sense, some of the figures that apply now at this time as to where we are in that respect. Where it's more difficult,
Chair,
it's more difficult now because obviously we're not having formal sort of examinations or tests in that sense, but in terms of examinations and comparisons, and I got to be careful what I say now. I was going to say O and A levels, but that was sort of probably date me somewhat, wouldn't it? So I better say GCSEs, I think that's right. Anyway, in that sense, there were comparisons being made and we were concerned about it. Sorry, you were going to say, Tom?
Hi, sorry, Mike, I know you were trying to come in. It's just really a couple of things, I suppose. Firstly, again, I think some of the members here who were in the corporate parenting had an amazing story from a young person who has excelled and who has gone on to independent school and achieved, and maybe that, I think that gave stark contrast to some of the basic things we could do with a slight change of approach or change of view. For example, I think the young person suggested that she didn't have a desk, for example. So it's whilst we know that safety is our main bread and butter, we need to also be having those other thoughts about how we can improve the learning opportunities, which is why I'm bringing this up here, because I know that Helen was really key in developing those extra bits of the pledges around education and development and achieving better. So that's, I suppose, what I'm trying to say is that these pledges, rather than just being pledges, have actually got some accountability attached. So which perhaps they haven't in the past. That was my main point. Thank you.
Okay, Tom, thanks. Mike Day.
Yeah, thanks, Paxton. I love the fact that we're actually joining things up and talking about education as well as social services. And whilst I agree with what Des was saying in broad terms, and I hope Des will forgive me, but just a change of word rather than alternative curriculum, I think we should be talking about an appropriate curriculum, because for many of these youngsters, the academic route is not an appropriate route for them. And, we should be thinking about using that word appropriate rather than alternative, which in some people's definition would perhaps smack of second best. And I know what Des was talking about, and I'm sure Des wouldn't want to go down that route at all. It's appropriate curriculum, I think we're all agreeing on. And, it's important, isn't it, that the work is all joined up between the different agencies, the different elements, the different departments. And, I think one of the key pieces of work that's gone on in education is that affecting NEET children, not in education, employment and training. And, I think people like Tom are ideally placed to be able to see how the different services can be joined up to ensure that, we are taking a holistic approach as far as the youngsters are concerned, and the same would be true, wouldn't it, of access to leisure services and other services that the council offer, just to make sure that, they feel that they have that ability to connect in the same way which all other youngsters can.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Mike, but it's alternative in as much as it's not the main academic stream for, heading to A levels and so on. There are technical aspirations for people and and environmental, all sorts of things that are suitable.
Yeah. I totally agree. I'm just I hope that the others will It's forgive the kind of semantic discussion, but it's, no. I totally agree with what you're saying, Des. Is that we should be looking to providing some of those routes that perhaps were offered in the past. Not that I want to go back, but the opportunity for the development of technical and other skills which would be more appropriate to youngsters.
Do you want to come in, Mike Dirk, before
thank you, Chair, and thank you, Des. You nearly made me choke on my Welsh cake, Des, when you mentioned me as you were talking. But I'm all right. I'm fine. As the Chair of the Policy Development Committee for Education and Skills, we've had some full, very challenging, very informative sessions. We've revisited the statistics relating to children in Swansea schools, and that was incredibly interesting, illuminating. We're going to focus on the stories of the children and the families and their wider sort of background when we look and try to overlap the data. So the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation, school achievements, at all levels, all the rest of it, and to look at differences there. And then we're going to be concentrating on what works and excellence across Swansea schools, particular focus on Dylan Thomas School and Pentre Harvard School. And what we looked at last time, and I think I'm fair, Des, in reflecting the members in the committee there, very strong focus on vocational education. So Mike Day, Mike, absolutely, move your muscles, roll your sleeves up. It could be gardening, it could be baking, it could be painting, decorating, etc. So those are critical skills that we want to inculcate into the education system earlier rather than later. I've done a lot of talking to people. I mean, I've worked in this field for like 30 years, child and family social services all those years ago, and I've seen great success and great tragedy. What works? What works for looked after children who do well in education? So I teach at a university. When I see those formerly looked after children getting their degree, what happened to those that inspired them to stay on in education? Whereas so many fall by the wayside very early on. So the committee is a lot of interest in vocational education, sport as a gelling factor to keep you on track, to give you momentum, to give you interest, to give you energy. And again, the phrasing is one thing: appropriate curriculum, alternate curriculum. What we're talking about is being led by what works to keep people on the education track and all the opportunities that affords kids. The behavioural support team in Cockett, Maestero with Amanda Taylor. I mean, this is a new dynamic and exciting approach. And the only way it's going to work is if we join the dots effectively across all the offer of the council, different departments in the council, but also our external partners and providers, including private sector organisations and charitable organisations. We've got to be brave, strong and strident. And there's a risk-taking element in this new challenging approach as well. But we've got to fight for the future of children like we've never done before, and measure the success as we go, and point at the weaknesses if we don't succeed. And that's critical, I think.
Okay, Mike, thank you. Did you want to come in, Julie, at all?
Sorry, it's yeah. I mean, I agree with all the points that have been made. I think that that the impact of the pandemic on our children, young people, not just in Swansea but across the whole of the Wales and UK, is yet to be truly felt. And I think if we can keep education at the heart of supporting them, will be really critical for them to help them in their recovery and moving forward and being on a journey of success for their future. And I think we have, as Mike Dirk said, all the right ingredients to achieve that. I would still shy away from comparing the attainment levels of looked after children with the wider education cohort. I think it's really important that we focus on what can help them succeed. And we hear about some fantastic successes of individual children, but what I would say is that we now have a very positive working relationship between education and social services. So I'm on the pre-management committee as vice chair, for example. Helen and myself meet regularly about the nutty issues around children not in education, employment and training, and what we're doing collectively to support that. So I think it's really healthy that we've got those really positive working relationships with colleagues across education and social services, because it's all for the benefit of not just looked after children, but the wider population of child and family across Swansea. So it's really positive.
Thank you, Julie. Yvonne, you have something you want to ask? I think you're muted, Yvonne.
Muted.
Sorry. Yes, I am. I wasn't going to chair, thanks, Chair, but I was just thinking, not for the first time, I'm asking, I appreciate you're in care for lots of different reasons, and I appreciate you probably come with a disadvantage. But I do quite often feel by labeling, by saying we can't compare them with the, aren't we accepting straight away that they're going to fail before they've had a chance? I don't particularly, I'm not looking for an answer or a necessary discussion. I'm just putting that out there. I do sometimes feel, I suppose, speaking from a Black person's point of view, you have that label. You're Black, so you can't possibly be speaking English, for example, or you're a woman, so you can't be doing A, B, or C. And to me, sometimes I feel we're saying you're in care, so your life's bound to be a mess. And I'm not saying that isn't the case for some people, but I'm saying what we're talking about happens in regular families. So should we sometimes step aside from the fact that child's in care and say, this is the best we're going to do for them. This is what they need to succeed. This is what they... Because yes, we're going to have those failures, but we're going to have those failures in any family. But my question really is, by sticking that label on them and accepting they're not going to do well before they start, are we doing them a disservice? As I said, I don't necessarily expect an answer straight away, but that was it, Chair.
Okay, anybody want to come back on that one? Either Elliot or I know Elliot's got his hand up to come in. I know Mike has as well, but Julie, you have. Anybody want to come back on that?
I'll just start, if you don't mind, and just to be clear that we remain very, very ambitious for our children who are in our care, and we support them to be aspirational in their dreams and hopes. And for me, it's about helping them to live their best life and supporting them to live their best life. And that's really the vision that we have for Child and Family Services for looked after children and those that leave our care. I'm sure Elliot would like to come in and maybe add to that, and similarly Councillor Dirk. But thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Elliot or Mike, who wants to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to add to that. I think, in all due respect to Yvonne, I think that isn't what we're doing, and I think the work that's been done with the corporate parenting has hopefully showed that, and that we have aspirations. And I think certainly listening to what Mike was saying around the work the education PTC is doing is showing that actually it's about not saying that you can't achieve, but looking at what you can achieve and what's the best way to achieve that. And I think Julie's point around not comparing is that, traditionally that's been the way it's done. But clearly when you're saying, year after year, well, the payment figures are less, then that is having an impact on those children who feel that and what's being said around that. So I really do support Julie's view on that, and I think it's far from what we're certainly not making a presumption that our looked after children can't achieve, and that isn't the mantra of the service at all. So I just wanted to add that.
Mike, you wanted to come back in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was going to say something similar along the lines of a cabinet member of Elliot there, really. When we're talking about children on the books of Child and Family Social Services, often we're talking about difficulties and challenges that most of us have never sniffed in our lifetime before. The challenges are incredible and heart-rending and incredibly emotional and long-standing, sometimes pre-birth and last a lifetime, So it's not that we're saying, Yvonne, I think that we kind of labeling people saying, oh, well, they're a failure, they've gone. We're saying that there are huge challenges to be tackled. Some colleagues will remember a few years ago, we had Tegan, a young person from Voices from Care Cymru. Chair, I know you remember, it was a great session with her, and the support worker, Tom, who came with her. And I think Tegan's point was, and I was a trustee of Voices from Care for a long time, it's about understanding where the child is, where the child stands today, mentoring the child holding their hand through incredible difficulties, but plotting a pathway so that they can succeed. That might mean, as Julie alluded to earlier, distance travelled, where they're starting from, where they're going, but we should set the bar as high as we possibly can. For me, if we see formerly looked after children graduating from universities across the UK, what's worked for them? Why hasn't it worked for others? I'm not saying everyone should have a university education, but I'm saying that we do have high achievers from the looked after child population. So we should be led by their voice. And that's something that we want to sort of feed into the Policy Development Committee. What kept them on track? And when everything else was, all their family connections were severed around them and they were facing incredible difficulties. What kept them, reading and enjoying?
I think that's what we were saying a couple of years ago, Mike, in that sense, when we were saying there was a big discrepancy at year 6 and year 11 between the results that were being achieved. And that was a concern that we had. Yvonne, you wanted to come back in?
Yes, Chair, only to say that it wasn't meant as a criticism of Julie or the report. I was just saying the way we work, because what Mike is suggesting, I was just saying the way we work, I do feel quite often there is the assumption ahead of time. Let's put it like that.
Okay. It's certainly been an interesting and wide-ranging discussion this one has been, I must admit, and I think there's a lot to learn, obviously, from the report that we had or from the presentation, the importance to children of what gives them a happy life, I suppose, at the end of the day is the most important thing, whether it's relationships they form or whatever. But to have a good as life as they possibly can, I think, is what you're all trying to achieve, and nobody's going to argue that. I just think we do have to ask the questions that we were asking before, just in terms of being a parent or a corporate parent in that sense. But that's not to say that we don't appreciate the work that does go on, is going on. And obviously you talk about academic achievement or vocational achievement, it can be sporting achievement, whatever. There can be various areas where children achieve differently, and I'm not going to argue that. But that's what I remembered from a couple of years back. We're not seeing that in the reports, and it would be interested to know what the situation is, whether that's improving or not. But having said that, I think it has been an interesting conversation, and I think everybody has made a major contribution to that. I would say thank you very much. Okay, can I move on to the next item on the agenda, or has anybody got to say anything to say to that? In that case, we move back to item 6 and go to the progress on the Child and Family Improvement Programme, please.
Thank you, Chair. Gemma and I will cover this item together. So I'll just provide an introduction, and then Gemma will take us through the priorities. So the document that we shared with you is our transformation and I guess recovery plan in light of what we've learned over the last 18 months in particular, due to the pandemic and the impact that that's had on the way that we able to deliver services, the way children and families are able to access services, and also the impact that that's had on children and families per se in terms of their experiences of living, being educated and working in Swansea. It also sets out our ambitions and hopes and aspirations for the future in terms of services. So our vision, we've revisited this year since I came into post, which it was my work anniversary yesterday, 1 year in post yesterday. But with staff, we sought their views on coming up with a vision which everybody understands, and so we settled with, after consulting with staff, doing what matters to make things better for children, young people and families. And that's about working with and alongside and in partnership with children and families, both as Child and Family Services, but also with our partner agencies in the across the public sector, but also in the community and voluntary sector. So our purpose there is captured, which reflects not only just our statutory duties around protecting children in particular from harm, and enabling them to have voice, choice and control, but also thinking about prevention and early intervention, and acknowledging that it's good to prevent the need or lessen the need for statutory intervention, because that's much better for children and families if they don't need that statutory intervention. So our improvement aspirations on that first page really are about how we can enable our workers, qualified social workers and alternatively qualified, to spend more time with families, because we know that's what makes a difference to them in terms of relationship, building a relationship. That's with the parents and the children and the young people. That we're looking to reduce the burden of paperwork and processes, because that's generally what can get in the way and distract people, because if they're servicing systems, it means they don't have as much time to spend with children and families. That we consistently focus on what matters and the voice of children and young people, which you talked about a lot already in the previous agenda item, because that's at the heart of what we're about. And that we want to create a shift in leadership thinking and behaviour across the workforce, so that it supports that focus on what matters, supports that staff being able to spend more time with children and families and cutting through the bureaucracy. And we have a greater sense of working as a whole service for the better outcomes of children, young people and families, and that we have a workforce who feel trusted to do the right thing at the right time. And that the way we measure our success in terms of performance indicators, some of which we're required to produce for Welsh Government, is meaningful and demonstrate how and where we're making a difference, and also informs and shapes practice to improve outcomes. So rather than looking back at what we did, so many assessments on time, but also looking forward, how can we then think about making improvements, and what might that look like in relation to outcomes for children and families. So we've shaped our service priorities around our improvement aspirations and thinking about the learning from COVID, and each part of the service that's led by a principal officer is similarly thinking in more detail about what that means for them in their particular part of the service with their staff, and that we're clear about our purpose and our principles and how that delivers our overall vision, as well as being very cognizant of making sure that aligns with the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, because when Care Inspectorate Wales do come and see us, they look at us through the lens of those bullet points there that are at the bottom of the first page of the plan and go on to the second page around people, voice and control, well-being, quality assurance, etc. So the way we've constructed our improvement and recovery plan is around those key headings, which I'll just ask Gemma to take us through in terms of what our plans and aspirations are over the next year, which we will excuse me, probably need to revisit in light of the pressures we're feeling from this wave of infections from COVID. But also we just want to do a recheck based on the feedback from the last Care Inspectorate Wales assurance visit. We're confident that we've covered all bases, but we just want to double check on that point in the next couple of weeks. Gemma, if I can hand over to you, if that's okay. And we're happy to take questions as you go along, Chair. Be guided by yourself.
Okay, thanks, Julie. Gemma?
Thanks, Julie. So what I'm going to do is give a bit of an update on some of the key areas under each of those priority points, if you like. So the first one is around people, voice and control. So we understand through some of the exploration work that we've done as part of our own improvement programme work, but then also as part of the recent assurance visit that Julie mentioned, that on a workforce level, we really understand the children and young people that we work with. And if you were to come into our service and speak to a social worker about any young person on their caseload, they could tell you in great detail what matters to that young person and how they're supporting them to achieve that. We also understand through looking at our systems that some of our paperwork doesn't necessarily lend itself well enough for us to record that. So that's been quite a common theme that's come out of some of the work that we've done most recently. So one of our key areas of development in that under people, voice and control is really about how we articulate, often in word form through our paperwork, what matters to our young people, and how collectively through support from our supported care planning teams or the wider network of professionals that are involved with those young people, how we're articulating what matters to them through some of the recording that we take as part of their journey with us. Our recent work has focused on how we strip that right back so that we can really focus on the voice of the child through the work that we do, thinking about the different forms and the different processes that we have so that we can be truly centred around the voice of the child and not led by paperwork and process, but instead led by the voice and what matters to our population of young people. That's still very much in the development stages, but we've moved that on quite significantly over the last 6 months or so. We're seeing some real progress in some of the small cases that we're looking at in that area. And then our other big ambition under this priority is around how we actively advocate for the voice of our children and young people to be involved in some of the service redesign work and our improvement aspirations moving forwards. So we've recently shifted our approach to sort of transformation and change management, if you like, and it now has a focus and where we start each piece of work thinking about what matters to that specific group of service users. And how we can involve them through the process of redesigning services and thinking about what new and different can look like, so that we're better able to support them to achieve what matters. You've heard how we've applied some of that thinking to our corporate parenting board, but we're very much using the skills that we have in the service, particularly from Tom, who you met earlier, about how we have a wide-reaching understanding of what matters, and how we feed that into the work that we're trying to improve on. And then also, so thinking about, you know, when we need to broker in services or work in a multi-agency way, how we do that quickly and effectively, and thinking about how we look outside of ourselves to think differently about how we connect with our partners, so that we're all collectively joined up around what matters to our young people. So those are two areas that we've progressed recently under that priority. The next one that you'll have seen is around prevention and early intervention. So we have recently and through COVID been thinking about how we work collectively around prevention, and we established some of our early help hubs right at the beginning of the pandemic, which I'm sure you've already heard about. But now that we're back from the school holidays, we're expanding on that, thinking about our continuum of needs and how we support other partners at that preventive stage to understand some of our thresholds and some of the work that we do, where we might do it and who might be available to support, so that partner agencies can go to the right place for the right support, and that's really quick and easy for them to access. So we're looking at developing that further as we move that forwards. We're hoping that in turn will support a shared understanding of our multi-agency thresholds and the work that different partners are able to do. So, for example, how schools might be able to support young people in their own way, and how we as early help or prevention services can work better together. We understand each other's perspective in more detail, so that we can, again, join up around the young people to make sure that we're doing the right thing. With regards to well-being, so one of the key priority areas for us is to develop a proactive and child-centred practice to using the special guardianship offer, including how we create a more fit-for-purpose policy and financial guidance that supports workers who are thinking about that as an appropriate approach for a young person. We're utilising some new roles in the service to explore what that policy might look like. And we're working collaboratively across the service to think about a different policy and how that might shape some of the work that we do in our supported care planning statutory teams. We're also planning on reviewing the safeguarding quality unit to develop and kind of agree new principles, purpose and value steps, and then to be able to roll in a different type of way of working in that area. We are planning a systems thinking intervention in early November. So that's using some systems theory to understand the workflow and the processes that staff need to go through. So looking at it from a systems perspective, trying to, as Julie mentioned earlier on, cut through some of the bureaucracy and conditions that we put in place to try and safeguard those young people. So it's easier for staff to do their job, and they get more time to spend with their families, because we know that's where the value work is. We'll also be exploring some of the assumptions that we have in that area that prevent us from achieving what matters, so that we can try to design those out and change our leadership thinking. So Julie mentioned one of our broad ambitions is to shift our leadership thinking. So we'll be able to apply this framework of transformation in that area and explore that there. With regards to our partners, we'll continue to try to develop and implement a sort of regional strategic plan. So some of this conversation is ongoing, but we've made some significant progress with the regional programme board team about ensuring that the voice of our children, or just having a a programme based around regional work relating to children and young people has its place on the board just as much as the adult services world does. And then a broader challenge that we've sort of set ourselves is to think about how we engage with Welsh Government on some of the systems outside of our control, and how we support them to understand our perspective so that we can take this ambition for making the work easy and doing the most valuable work that we can, and scale that up across to consider some of the challenges that are imposed on us by legislation, and how we creatively use our legal parameters to explore really good working with children and young people. We're revisiting our quality assurance programme, and so we're trying to focus on the lived experience of our children and young people. So when we're thinking about how we quality assure the work that we're doing, we're coming at it from the perspective of how we've achieved what matters to children and young people rather than how we followed due process. That will include the creation of things like new measures, so that we're able to actively measure our progress against achieving what matters, an array of different platforms, from the direct work that we do, knowing that we're making a difference, to the strategic conversations that we have and how we have those conversations at more of a regional and national level. And we're developing a culture based on a continued commitment to sort of learning and development. So thinking about how we encourage our workforce to be comfortable in exploring new ideas, testing out new ways of working, so that we can continue to learn from the things that we do and be better. One of the biggest programs of work that we've done that supports this commitment has looked at coaching and mentoring across the program, across the workforce. So a number of our strategic leaders have had access to mentoring, and we're filtering that down through our workforce. The idea being that we are supporting the workforce to feel more comfortable in things like stepping up into different roles, and how we create that culture based on trust and honesty in our practice. With regards to the priority F, our workforce, how we're developing a different workforce, a lot of the work that we've been doing has been around well-being, how we support, particularly through the pandemic and in light of the challenges that we've had with remote working, how we support our workforce to feel well at work and to turn up and do their roles to the best of their ability. We're also exploring a recruitment and retention programme, because we know that we have some challenges in that area. So we're trying to think more long term about how we develop a programme that looks at getting young people in, potentially through apprenticeship programmes, and developing them across the service. We're a unique service in that there's lots of opportunities for lots of different experiences in the professional world of work. So thinking about how we join some of that together, so that we can really grow our own staff, and we can utilise the skills and the talent that we see in our workforce, and encourage them to develop with us in Swansea. And then finally, the last priority for us is around embedding our systems thinking approach. So we have shifted our transformation programme to look at more task and finish based interventions. So accessing each service area and exploring how we apply systems thinking theory rather than traditional change management or project management theory to particular areas of work, so that we're able to really look at the things that we do, or the things that we ask our staff to do, the steps which we ask them to take in order to do their jobs, and how we're set up to achieve that. Sometimes we find that actually we have lots of steps in place that we've created over time that we don't always need to keep, and there's opportunities to explore different ways of working. We recently did a piece of work in our supported care planning teams which has set the direction for that, really, and we've explored a number of different service areas over the last year, applying this theory. It seems to be working for us so far, and we're exploring different areas of redesign, and what a new or different world of work could look like, so that it's easier for our staff to do the value work, to get in and spend more time with families, because we know that that's where they make the significant difference. So it ties in with our ambition to do sort of less time behind a desk, less time writing up paperwork, and more time actually out there within the community and with our children and young people and families, working with them on achieving what matters and helping them to move forwards to achieve what it is that good looks like for them. So that gives you a bit of a roundup of some of the priority areas and how we've developed them over the last sort of year or so. So I'll stop there and take any questions.
Thank you, Gemma. Interesting, I have to say, and I know Mike Dirk has got a question for you there. So, Mike, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Gemma. Really interesting. Are we at last having a bonfire of bureaucracy in child and family social services? I mean, this is I can't believe what I'm hearing here. This sounds very exciting to me. I hope so. Reduce the bureaucracy, free up staff time to do the face work with the people who need it the most. That's one question. Are we finally getting rid of a lot of the red tape and paperwork? Relating to that, how positive are our interactions with the Welsh Government? I was a team leader in Child and Family Social Services for the Welsh Government, and you'd have quite junior people making up new rules, sometimes new admin requirements, and cascading them to every local authority in Wales. Ludicrous, right? Clogging up the system. So that relates to that. And the other thing I'd ask about is this idea, again, another bugbear of mine, qualified social workers, as Julie touched on and you touched on there, the idea of having skilled, experienced, knowledgeable workers and keeping that team, nurturing the team. Are we starting to blur the line between qualified social work and first-class professional social care skills? Which comes down to that idea of having a piece of paper that says I've got a degree in social work versus I'm a brilliant communicator with a lot of skills. Are we blurring that line now? Because we're always going to have a shortage of social workers because the pool is so narrow.
I can come back on, perhaps I'll cover the last point, we'll do it in reverse order, but I just want to say, yes, we have started the bonfire, Mike, with much glee. But mindful of ensuring we still comply with statutory requirements. So in terms of the workforce per se, what we're acknowledging is that as well as social workers in our workforce, we have staff that have alternative qualifications, and their role is just as important in working with children, young people and families and achieving good outcomes. So it's about thinking of the whole service and what it can offer and how it can work together. And when we're thinking about how we develop and grow our own, absolutely, what we still are required is that social workers have to complete certain tasks according to legislation. So we can't move away from that. But what we can do is think creatively about what our model of working could look like and think that, OK, social workers have to do these tasks. So, for example, they have to undertake child protection investigations. But if there's work around that, that's supporting children and families before we get to that point, then you don't need to be a qualified social worker. And so we're thinking about what that could look like, because we are going to continue to face huge challenges in recruiting social workers across the UK. We have a strategic plan that would grow our own, but that will be 3 years away in the making. But in the meantime, what might that look like so that we are able to offer the best services and achieve the best outcomes, but still comply with statutory requirements? I can't remember what your middle question was. Hopefully Gemma can.
It was in relation to the conversations with Welsh Government, I think.
Oh, right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah, as Julie mentioned, there's a level of legality that we need to go through and that we can't move away from, because it's written in our legislation, isn't it, that we need to be compliant, and that creates our safety net, and that helps us to make sure we're practicing safely. But I think what our ambition is that over time and through sort of seeing how this bonfire progresses itself, we'll be able to build some evidence for what's helpful and what isn't always so helpful at that level, and we'll be able to use that in our future conversations with Welsh Government. But it's important that we do that from an evidence base, so that we're not having rational conversations about it's based on opinion. We can show them what is and isn't working, and work collaboratively together with Welsh Government as a shared partner in our social care and national social care, isn't it, as well, so that we can explore some of those bigger ticket and more difficult challenges that we might have.
I think we were talking yesterday, and I'm sure Des will remember this, about in another scrutiny meeting, which was Service Improvement and Finance, about further bureaucracy being imposed on councils by Welsh Government in terms of performance monitoring. And I don't know whether that's fed back down to you yet, or whether it's going to come down to you, but it will come down to you. And it is a problem, and it is a concern that we have, basically, that we explained, that we expressed, that too much officer time is spent in terms of providing information for Welsh Government, when you'd be better off doing the sorts of things that you are doing, to be honest. But that, I think, that's what we were saying yesterday in essence.
Yeah, I think so, Chair. And if it does occur, then I think it should be flagged up, perhaps to scrutiny, and
yeah,
you know, we could deal with it there.
We will be interested to hear on your experience on that, and whether we need to be saying anything ourselves as scrutiny panels to Welsh Government, because it might be coming from scrutiny panels as one of the mechanisms for doing that, apart from, we were saying possibly yesterday, the WLGA and other councillors, but that's another matter. But we could do that certainly in terms of scrutiny. Basically, systems thinking, as I understand it, is basically about communications at the end of the day, and putting the right communication channels in place to get the right decisions that you want to take. I don't know if that's the sort of principles that you're working to, but obviously, hopefully, that would determine what communication needs to take place and ensure that you avoid unnecessary communication, which I think is probably what you're getting at, so you can concentrate on the real matters that need to be dealt with. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, definitely. And good communication would be something that underpins the systems thinking approach we're trying to take. Ultimately, we want to look at our services from the perception of the system. So we're looking at what's getting in the way of us achieving good work is generally found in our systems. It isn't found in our staff. Our staff are incredible. They do excellent work for us. So we're trying to shift our thinking so that we can focus on how we support those staff to do the best that they can. And most of the time, the answers are in our own system. So good communication would be one of those areas. Absolutely, it would be. But so would things like paperwork, IT systems, processes, the legal framework that surrounds us. It's all of the things really that wrap around our staff to help them move forwards and do the best that they can do. So we're trying to apply that way of thinking to our change programme and look at it from that perspective first, with some of those principles as you just described, really.
Okay, thank you, Gemma. Anybody else got any questions at this point for Gemma or Julie? Okay, another interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
Another very interesting and thought-provoking presentation. Certainly something that we're going to have to think about. And thank you very much, Gemma, for what you've been doing for us today, and obviously Julie for backing it up. Now, I know we're going to move on to another item now, which is the Appreciative Inquiry video. At this point in time, I have to talk about the exclusion of the public from this, because this is other information which is going to be confidential in respect to the people involved in the video. So I'm really going to ask the panel to vote and ask if they agree on exclusion of the public from the meeting. I think we'll have to go around you one by one. I can't see any other way around that in terms of voting on this, but we need to have that vote, I think, to take place, just to make sure that we're right. Am I right there, Liz?
Yeah, I think that's probably the easiest way to do it.
So
can I move the recommendation? And Chair, I think you'll need a proposer and a seconder.
Thank you, Des. It's always handy to have a presiding officer here. Great, so thank you for that.
Like second, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. If you don't agree with the proposal, could you say so? If not, we'll accept. We'll take it as that you're accepting the proposal, and won't need a specific vote then in that respect. Anybody objecting? Okay, that seems to be unanimously voted on, that we will now exclude the public at this point. So I will ask Liz now to say that we're going to close session and ask Liz to stop recording the meeting.